Chapter 13, in which we learn the M word. Draco joined the Quidditch team. Ron gave himself slugs, and Harry learned a slur. "Apologize to Hermione," Harry said the next day in the same courtyard. He kept his voice down on the theory that Draco was slightly less awful without an audience. "I'm sorry, Potter. I can't hear you when you make no sense. Apologize to Hermione, or I won't be your rival anymore." Draco looked Harry up and down and snorted. His minions lurked in the background. "As if you have a choice." "I do, because I can tell everyone you're Hermione's rival for top of the class, competing with a muggle-born witch." Harry didn't add, "and losing." Draco went, an interesting puce color. "She insulted me first, Potter. So you'll be being the gentleman or something. I don't care why you do it. You can insult her all you like, just as long as you don't call her a." Draco eyed him. "Call her that," Harry finished. "You," Draco said thoughtfully, "will owe me a favor. Because I wanted you to not be a giant git. Because I wanted you to act like a decent person. To Hermione Granger, you will owe me a favor. Say it, Potter, or get out of my way." "Fine, I'll owe you a favor." This was probably a terrible idea, but watching Hermione as she gleefully set Draco's elegantly calligraphed apology note on fire was really wonderful somehow. Chapter 14. Harry would be safer as an accountant. It took Harry weeks to get up the courage to confront Snape. Weeks of dealing with Lockhart, Quidditch, and Malfoy, in an exhausting spiral that left him little time to feel sorry for himself and less time to plot. Still, eventually he settled on a strategy in true Gryffindor fashion: charge straight ahead, smash everything. He waited until the weekend so there wouldn't be any embarrassing witnesses for what was sure to end badly. Professor Snape proceeded to ignore him. "You said last year I should be treated like everyone else. I don't think you would have tried to get everyone else expelled at the start of term." Professor Snape continued grading papers. "I know you hate me. I know you hated my father, but I thought better of you somehow. I see the headmaster already has you copying his pedantic moral soliloquies. I am not charmed, Mr. Potter." "I don't understand you at all," Harry said, and turned to leave. "Mr. Potter," Professor Snape said, when Harry was almost out of the room, hand on the door. Harry paused. "It is not in your nature, but consider the previous year. How many times have you almost died since you came to Hogwarts? I thought perhaps it was Quirrell, but this year you managed to nearly murder yourself via tree, and the year is young. I truly do not expect you to live to graduate, so you might as well give up." Harry took a few minutes to disentangle this. "You're not the first person to tell me I'd be in danger if I came back to Hogwarts this year," he ground out. "And I'll tell you what I told him: I don't need your help." Professor Snape said something as he slammed the door behind him, but Harry was already running, and he didn't hear it. Forget Snape, forget Darby, forget everything. His face was dry by the time he hit the Quidditch pitch. Harry was a wizard, and he had a broom, and he could fly, and in the rush of air and twist of wind, he could forget all the problems that waited for him on the ground. Chapter 15. Draco is great at making friends. Draco took a moment during potion brewing to come over and eye Harry's potion, which was stubbornly bright pink instead of lavender. "Oh dear, failing again, are we? You know, it's too bad we're not friends, Potter. I might take pity on you and tutor you." Harry glanced at Ron, who shrugged, because as of February last year Ron had a death vow to stay out of Harry's potions thing. Harry looked back at Draco. "We're not friends. I'm hurt." Draco rehearsed that in a mirror was what Draco was. "You're a bully," Harry said flatly, "so we're not friends." "I am not," Draco said. Harry gave him a flat look, and then glanced at Hermione and Neville down the way. "Fred and George Weasley are bullies, and you like them fine," Draco drawled quietly. And then, more loudly, And Neville doesn't mind me suggesting ways for him to improve himself, do you, Neville? 2 points from Gryffindor for distracting your classmates, Potter, Snape interrupted. Draco, taking the hint, went back to his own potion. Harry seethed quietly through class. Rata, Ron murmured to him. It's not like Fred and George hurt anyone. Harry nodded, but the barb stuck under his skin, just the way he knew Draco knew it would. He and Draco were getting to know each other far too well for Harry's comfort. Perhaps it was that edge of anger and anxiety that prompted him to approach Professor Snape after class. It won't work, Harry said abruptly, not looking up at his professor. Trying to make me miserable so I'll leave school, I won't do it. Mr. Potter, the next time you attempt to divine my motives, I will have you scrubbing cauldrons for a week of your precious Quidditch practices. So really, his long-term goal to get his potions professor to like him was going wonderfully. Chapter 16. Mandrakes and Mysteries. Draco Malfoy, whatever his reasons, did not yell slurs in the hallways of Hogwarts upon discovering Harry standing over an apparently dead cat, with blood smeared on the walls. Headed grin and go couldn't happen to a nicer animal, hip hip hurrah. Which is why he was leading a choir of cheers when Filch turned up. It really wasn't much better than him using the M word, from Harry's perspective. The only positive thing about the entire evening was Snape talking about something called a Mandrake restorative draft, which wasn't in any of their textbooks. Granted, when Harry tentatively asked about it, all he got was a tired, "We have a library for a reason, Mr. Potter," but that was very nearly encouraging. The recipe for Mandrake restorative drafts was horribly complicated, but the longest stage seemed to be growing the actual Mandrake, which Harry took as a tentative plus. On the list of things he didn't want Professor Snape to know about, a mysterious phantom voice telling him to rip, tear, and kill had jumped right to the top of the list. So he was a little distracted during the next potions class, trying to keep up a constant stream of thought about elephants. Pink elephants, thinking about pink elephants. Mr. Potter, what precisely are you doing? Pink elephants. Scrub that out and start over. Harry eyed his potion, his sludge, to be brutally Frank's side, and went to the sink to obey. Later, after class and scrubbing tube worms off the desks, really, Professor Snape eyed him without favor. An explanation, Mr. Potter. I was thinking about pink elephants. Professor Snape gave him look number 5. Children are the worst. Because I thought if you could read minds, you'd hear the elephants and not what I was thinking about, Harry explained hurriedly. Your guilty conscience is not my problem, Mr. Potter, regrettable as your natural tendency towards lying may be. Your potions are. Sorry, Professor. Professor Snape gave him a very unreadable look. Repeat after me, Potter. Occlumency. Occlumency, Professor. Now, what do you do when you discover an unfamiliar term? Ask Hermione, Professor. Professor Snape looked at him under lowered lids. Thankfully, your horrendous study habits are also not my problem. Go, you are giving me a headache. I have a headache potion that might help. Well, Harry thought that went well. It turned out occlumency was the study of defending the mind against mind reading, and that mind reading was more complicated than just being in the same room with someone you thought could probably read minds. Principles of Mind Magics was an even more awful book than the Introductory Potions text, but Hermione was interested enough in the project to read bits of it and summarize for Harry and Ron. You're supposed to clear your mind and only then start constructing mental defenses, she explained later. And it's supposed to help with dreams sometimes, Harry. Harry pretended very hard not to have heard her, on the theory that his dreams would go away if he didn't think about them. Your headache potion, Mr. Potter. Harry eyed him. You are not the sort of boy who thinks things through. You have headaches frequent enough to need it. Therefore, you have it with you. Give it to me. Harry glared, but handed over the small glass jar of smoky blue potion. Professor Snape held it up to the light, eyeing it. The standard recipe. Yes, Professor. Professor Snape didn't comment on this, opening the jar and taking a drop of the potion out with a finger. He touched it to his tongue, expression pensive. You are unlikely to poison yourself. No more than 2 doses a day. Do not use stale frog spawn, and do not share. I will not have another amateur apothecary set up behind my back. Does that happen a lot, Professor? Harry said, grabbing his jar back before Professor Snape could change his mind. Students are my punishments for my sins. You must have an awful lot of sins then, Harry said, and froze as he saw Professor Snape's expression. Harry backed away slowly, because he was beginning to get a sense of when Professor Snape was about to tip over from dutiful teacher who hated him into adult wizard who hated him. Survive, mate? Ron asked, waiting in the hall. Yeah, I think so. What's he keep wanting to talk to you about, anyway? Harry showed him the headache potion. Potions. I think if he weren't allergic to teaching, he would have said I'd done a pretty good job. Ron clapped him on the shoulder. You need higher standards, mate. Chapter 17. Most Potent Potions. The argument about whether Draco Malfoy was the heir of Slytherin reminded Harry eerily of their argument about Snape the previous year, and it was hard to put his objection into words when Ron was going on about dark wizards, and Harry had to admit Lucius Malfoy was really suspicious. It wasn't as if Draco was a good person or anything. And Hermione had said, ever so innocently, there are lots of powerful potions in most potent potions. I'm sure we could copy down a few of them before returning the book to the library. And Harry was stuck. Even if it wasn't Malfoy, logically speaking it had to be a Slytherin, right? Heir of Slytherin, after all. It could be Crabbe. Harry had a bad feeling about Crabbe, and torturing cats was just his style, though Harry wasn't sure being smart enough to torture cats was. Harry paced Moaning Myrtle's bathroom anxiously, checking on the door and windows. There should be enough air moving here to prevent a repeat of the Snape smelling his hair incident. Thank God Draco'd never heard about that. If it were less creepy and out of order, it would actually be quite nice, as bathrooms went. Girls really did get nice things. There was even a snake etched into one of the taps. Snakes, Harry thought happily, were good luck. Having Hermione arguing him into breaking the rules was really a disconcerting experience, he thought a little bit later. Something about stealing from Snape's store cupboard stomped all over his bad idea alarm, but, well, it was Hermione. Beating Malfoy at Quidditch was the only thing that went well that week, if you could call getting his arm broken going well. The theft wacersy, even if the night before Harry couldn't manage to sleep. A firework aimed at Crabbe's cauldron of swelling solution provided the diversion. Hermione accomplished her task, and Harry tried to ignore the look in Snape's eyes and the tone of his voice. If I ever find out who threw this, Snape whispered, I shall make sure that person is expelled. The first clue was Neville's frantic hand gestures the next morning over breakfast, the universal signal for Snape, right behind you. Harry and Ron froze, and across from them Hermione smiled bright and fragile. Good morning, Professor, she chirped. Potter, I require a moment of your time after your classes today. What's this about, Professor? Harry asked, twisting to look at him. Ignoring the question entirely, Snape swept away towards the staff table. He doesn't make any sound when he moves, Ron hissed. He must part vampire. I don't think you can have part vampires, Hermione said doubtfully. It's not in any of the books. He can't get you on anything, Ron said brightly, so don't worry about it. Harry thought about professors that could read minds, stolen boomslang skin, the look in Malfoy's eyes as he got swelling solution all over himself, and thought it probably wouldn't be that simple. He probably just wants to yell at someone, Harry said brightly, or have me scrub slugs again. You really should talk to Professor McGonagall about him, Harry, Hermione added. He's not being fair to you. And have Professor Snape tell her Harry's been opening the Chamber of Secrets and letting off fireworks and things, Ron challenged. I don't see that ending well, do you? The argument proceeded apace, in a friendly way, and Harry let himself relax for a while. Snape was standing at the front of the potions classroom, holding a giant blue book. He pointed to a stool. Harry sat, avoiding meeting his eyes, mind empty as if waiting for a snitch to dart into his field of vision. Sit, Raid. The book Snape handed to him was a huge, ancient thing bound in dragonhide, almost bigger than Harry himself. He propped it on the counter and peered at the parchment, deciphering the old-fashioned handwriting. And upon such time as the thief was found, it was found that he had been a master, and all were aghast that such a thing could be done by one of their own. So it was agreed that none should buy from him, and none should sell to him. He was no one, and his mastery nothing. For truly is it not the blackest of sins to take the work of another, prepared by their hands, and for their purposes? Are we not a brotherhood? At which point Harry stopped reading and simply stared at the text, feeling numb and awful and like the lowest pond scum. It's not as if he made a habit off stealing when he didn't have a good reason. Food, sometimes, but that was different. He didn't think even Professor Snape would argue with that. He glanced up at Professor Snape and revised that too. Professor Snape would probably argue with that somehow. Are you trying to get yourself expelled, Potter? His professor asked softly. There are easier ways. No, sir. I am waiting for an excuse then. I expect it to be exceptional. Harry thought about excuses and reasons and Hermione. He thought about his dreams of the future, which if they involved him living to be a grown-up, often involved Professor Snape at some point apologizing to him for being a git and admitting that he was really great at potions. And could they do something vague and undefined together? Create a new potion, maybe, without Snape yelling at him for being an idiot, preferably, but Harry's dreams weren't quite that detached from reality. I didn't do anything, Harry said heavily. But if I had, it'd only be if it was important. Important? 12-year-olds do not do important things, Mr. Potter. That is what adults are for. Harry couldn't think of a thing to say to that. You are aware that in case of important things, emergencies, the correct response is to go to an adult. Harry turned this over in his head. Snape was still speaking in that scary, soft voice, near a whisper. Professor McGonagall didn't believe me last year about Voldemort, Harry said, staring at the book in his lap. Then choose a different adult, Potter, Snape snapped. Harry jerked his head up and met his professor's eyes in blatant shock. Professor Snape, Harry said very, very slowly, are you asking me to trust you? They looked at each other for a long moment. Never speak of this again, Snape said. Right, Harry nodded sharply and hopped down off the stool. It wouldn't be right or kind to talk about a professor's lapse into temporary insanity. Chapter 18. An overdue conversation with Neville. The first week of brewing Polyjuice was one of the happiest in Harry's life. He read about advanced venoms and creepy concoctions in most potent potions, and decided to skip learning the laxative potion entirely. He couldn't actually imagine making most of the potions from the book, but the way they were put together was interesting, even if it involved sitting on an out-of-order toilet and peering at tiny spidery handwriting. There was a bit of an awkward conversation with Hermione, though, when the time came to prepare the ingredients for the potion. Harry, I know you really enjoy making potions, but we only have enough for one try, and sometimes you get a little distracted. When you work on your potions, it's understandable, but is it all right if I make this one? You can make the next one. And she looked so nervous and frazzled that all Harry could do was hug her and assure her that it was fine. He didn't mind. He'd be happy to watch. It was really complicated after all. And he didn't even want to think about Snape's reaction if more potions ingredients went missing from the cupboard. Never again. Admittedly, being thought the heir of Slytherin and showing off that he was a Parselmouth to the whole school during dueling club could have gone better, and he didn't know what that look Snape had given him had been about. And then there was the conversation with Neville. They were in their dormitory and had a rare moment of privacy. Neville gave him nervous look and said, "You've been breaking rules again." With Ron and Hermione. "Sorry, Neville, I'm not going to tell." "You're not. You did have a good reason last time." "I have a good reason this time, too," Harry assured him quickly. "Ah, do you want to know?" "No, I don't think so. Professor Snape hates me enough already, and I'd break my grandmother's heart if I got expelled. I'd manage it, you know I would." Harry considered the ways Neville managed to mess up basic spellwork and winced. It wasn't that Neville was bad at studying, as far as he could tell. Spells just went wrong somehow around him, especially when he was nervous. "Sorry, Neville." "Don't worry about it," Neville said with a small smile. "Just, it's not Voldemort again, is it?" Harry flinched. "Aye, was it Voldemort again?" Harry's blood chilled just thinking about it. "It's the heir of Slytherin, whoever that is." Neville nodded, looking gloomy. "Let me know if there's anything I can do to help." "I will, thanks, Neville, and sorry about last year." He couldn't help thinking about Draco's comment about bullies when Fred and George decided to have a good time by laughing about him being the heir of Slytherin all over school. It was sort of funny, but at the same time, it really just wasn't. It made him feel better, but the rest of the school kept flinching. It made him feel unpleasantly like Draco Malfoy, and that made him feel like, somehow, this was all Draco Malfoy's fault, which made him feel a little better about Hermione's plan for spying. Chapter 19. Bigotry is not easy. "Saint Potter, the Mudblood's friend," said Malfoy slowly. "He's another one with no proper wizard feeling, or he wouldn't go around with that jumped-up Granger mudblood, and people think he's Slytherin's heir. Except we shouldn't use those words, should we, boys?" He laughed softly, and Harry held his breath in an attempt to avoid shouting. He'd thought, somehow, that Draco was better than this, not just hiding it. "Right, Draco," Ron mumbled, saving Harry from having to say anything. "I wish I knew who it is," said Malfoy petulantly. "It's hard to plan anything without proper information." Ron's jaw dropped so that Crabbe looked even more clueless than usual. Fortunately, Malfoy didn't notice, and Harry, thinking fast, said, "You must have some idea who's behind it all." "You know I haven't, Goyle. How many times do I have to tell you?" snapped Malfoy. "And Father won't tell me anything about the last time the chamber was opened either. Of course, it was 50 years ago, so it was before his time, but he knows all about it, and he says that it was all kept quiet and it'll look suspicious if I know too much about it. But I know one thing: last time the Chamber of Secrets was opened, a mudblood died. So I bet it's a matter of time before one of them's killed this time. I hope it's Granger," he said with relish. Ron was in no shape to ask another question, and Harry wasn't doing much better, nearly blind with fury. "Why her?" "Because she's Potter's precious pet, of course." Draco gave them a cool, arrogant look. "No repeating that, mind. Father wants us to leave the heir to his business, but Potter's still worth cultivating." Harry was trying to resist the urge to cultivate his fist into Draco's face, and Ron wasn't doing much better. He was turning redder, and Draco was looking between them curiously. Even Ron's hair was turning red. "Medicine for my stomach," Ron grunted, and without further ado they sprinted the length of the Slytherin common room, hurled themselves at the stone wall, and dashed up the passage, hoping against hope that Malfoy hadn't noticed anything. Malfoy noticed something. "Potter," Draco Malfoy said stiffly, that Saturday, gesturing Harry to precede him into a semi-private part of what Harry was beginning to think of as their argument courtyard. It was raining, so Harry leaned against one of the pillars. "Malfoy," Harry glared at him. "I assume that was you with Weasley the other day." Harry shrugged, because talking to Malfoy really wasn't high on his list of things to do today. "I'm not apologizing again," Malfoy said abruptly. "You break into our common room, you take what you get." Harry knotted his hands together and tried to find something calm inside him. It didn't really work. Malfoy was just so awful, and he didn't have to be awful, and it was just. "Why do you hate Hermione so much?" he burst out with. "Just because I'm friends with her." "Don't be absurd, Potter. I hate each of you and Granger and Weasley individually for your own special reasons. I hate Granger because she's entirely obnoxious." "That's no reason to hope she gets murdered," Harry hissed. "I should hex you." "Try it," Draco said. "I've got Crabbe and Goyle in shouting distance, and I bet I can get you kicked off the Quidditch team. Poor, dear Draco, victim of the heir of Slytherin." "You know I'm not." "Obviously. So why pretend?" "Because I'm trying to help him," Draco said, as if speaking to a very stupid small animal. "Because I agree with him." Harry tried to clear his mind, and failed miserably. "Why aren't Crabbe and Goyle right over your shoulders anyway? Why are Weasley and Granger not over yours?" "I had Quidditch practice," Harry muttered. "That's different." "It really isn't. And to answer your question, Crabbe and Goyle aren't here because I plan to talk about them, and it's easier to talk about people behind their back." "I don't want to talk to you, Malfoy. I don't want to look at you. I want you to never talk to or look at Hermione ever again." "Or you'll do what?" "Or I'll leave you to her," Harry snapped. "She likes to set things that annoy her on fire, you know." Draco looked uneasy. "Good," Harry thought vengefully. "What will you give me if I leave Granger alone?" Draco asked abruptly. "I don't look like that, Malfoy. I don't. I don't play games with people like that." "I want you not to drug my minions again," Draco said, continuing as if Harry hadn't said anything at all. "It's embarrassing. That's fair, isn't it? I'll leave yours alone if you leave mine alone." "You're not the heir, so I don't need to do anything with them." Draco grinned crookedly. "You thought I was the heir of Slytherin. I'm flattered." "You arg. I could get you in a lot of trouble for trespassing, you know. You don't have to look like I stepped on your cat." "You want Tamada, my friend." "Not personally. I just wouldn't care if she died, and it would be," Draco shrugged. "Convenient. I'm not going to help the heir, Harry. I'd much rather stay out of this little death match you have going and congratulate the winner." "That's not what you told Crabbe and Goyle." Draco smiled like a lizard. Harry was pretty sure there was a logic puzzle like this, but his patience had run out. He turned and stalked away, and Draco didn't stop him. He was so glad he and Draco weren't friends. Chapter 20. Harry Isn't That Deep. The rest of Christmas break was mostly spent in trying to cheer Hermione up about being turned half-cat potions class. When it resumed, chilled to record levels thanks to the new vigor in Harry and Draco's feud. Draco took absolute delight in pointing out every toe Harry put out of line and every mistake he made, as well as seeing how often he could toss inappropriate ingredients into Harry's potions. Harry truly regretting having an interest for Draco to poke holes in. It gave far too wide a margin for creativity. Hexing his diary out of Malfoy's hands did feel pretty good, though even if he didn't like the ugly look in Draco's eyes afterwards. Time rolled onwards. Harry met Tom Riddle, confronted Hagrid, and Dumbledore left the school. Students weren't allowed to go anywhere alone, curtailing any efforts Harry might have made at independent study. With Hermione petrified, it all felt like too much work anyway. One person, however, seemed to be thoroughly enjoying the atmosphere of terror and suspicion. Draco Malfoy was strutting around the school as though he had just been appointed head boy. Harry didn't realize what he was so pleased about until the potions lesson about 2 weeks after Dumbledore and Hagrid had left, when, sitting right behind Malfoy, Harry overheard him gloating to Crabbe and Goyle. "I always thought Father might be the one who got rid of Dumbledore," he said, not troubling to keep his voice down. I told you he thinks Dumbledore's the worst headmaster the school's ever had. Maybe we'll get a decent headmaster now. Someone who won't want the Chamber of Secrets closed. McGonagall won't last long. She's only filling in. Snape swept past Harry, making no comment about Hermione's empty seat and cauldron. "Sir," said Malfoy loudly, "Sir, why don't you apply for the headmaster's job?" "Now, Malfoy," said Snape, though he couldn't suppress a thin-lipped smile. "Professor Dumbledore has only been suspended by the governors. I dare say he'll be back with us soon enough." "Yeah, right," said Malfoy, smirking. "I expect you'd have Father's vote, sir. If you wanted to apply for the job, I'll tell Father you're the best teacher here, sir." Snape smirked as he swept off around the dungeon, fortunately not spotting Seamus Finnegan, who was pretending to vomit into his cauldron. "It truly puzzles me that Themagil haven't all packed their bags by now," Malfoy went on. "I bet." "Would you shut up, Malfoy?" Harry interrupted. "Sure, Potter. I'll spare your delicate sensibilities. How is Granger these days, anyway?" "She is going to be fine. Thanks for asking." The bell rang at that moment, which was lucky. It interrupted what would very definitely have been just as offensive as everything else Malfoy had been saying. "Hurry up, I've got to take you all to herbology," barked Snape over the class's heads, and off they marched. Snape had been pretty thoroughly ignoring Harry for months outside what Harry was beginning to think of as normal levels of criticism. But Harry couldn't help but noticing that the man took more than his fair share of turns, escorting Harry between classes. If Lacartha had been the one trying to keep him alive, he'd have had a lot better luck sneaking off to the Forbidden Forest, he thought resentfully. "This is getting ridiculous, Potter," Draco informed him a few days later, interrupting what had been almost a good morning. Granted, it hadn't had a chance to get started yet, because it was before breakfast. Harry looked longingly at the table just a little bit further into the great hall. "What is?" You can't set me on fire with your eyes, so you might as well stop trying." "I always act like this, Malfoy." "No, you're cross about Granger. I didn't do anything to Granger." "Shut it." Draco folded his arms. "You owe me a favor." "I'm a little busy right now, Malfoy." "My favor is you stop acting like I'm personally responsible for everything." "Your father." "Our conversations never do go well when we talk about each other's fathers, do they?" Harry had to admit this was entirely true, and subsided. "So, that favor," Draco prompted. "I'll stop being upset with you when you stop being so happy all the time." "I am not publicly disagreeing with my father for you, Potter. Not in a million years." "Then I'm not publicly getting along with you, Malfoy." "Oh well, that's all right then. Cheers." And with a cheery smile, Malfoy went to the Slytherin table. Harry had a sneaking suspicion that Malfoy thought Harry had just agreed to something. Harry had a pretty good idea of what Professor Snape would think about him confronting the heir of Slytherin and a giant basilisk, so he didn't ask him for his opinion beforehand. He had one frantic moment in the middle of confronting Riddle to think, Neville has good instincts about when something's a plot by Lord Voldemort, but then he didn't have any more time for idle thoughts, caught up in survival. Chapter 21, Trust. It was really too nice a day for Harry to be inside, but he had one last errand to run before term ended. Hopefully, this wasn't a terrible idea. He finally tracked the potions professor down doing a sweeping patrol of the green outside the school. "Professor." "Yes, Mr. Potter." Can I threaten my relatives with you?" Professor Snape just looked at him. "Only, it would really help with being able to do the potions homework, and they know I can't do magic at home now." "Homework is insufficient reason to threaten muggles, Potter," Snape said, sounding tired. "These relatives would be Petunia Evans and her husband, and my cousin, Dudley. You may threaten the muggles in my name if you are in mortal peril, and not before. Severus Snape has a vested interest in my survival, or something like that." Harry grinned. I'm not sure I'll phrase it like that, but thanks, Professor. You know Aunt Petunia? No, I do not, Snape hesitated. We met briefly many years ago. So she'll know who I'm talking about. Great. Why me, if I may ask? Well, you're my scariest professor. And yet you never listen to a word I say. Obviously, I am not trying hard enough. No, 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 you're terrifying. Really intimidating. Everyone says so. You really don't need to try any harder. Snape smiled a small, crooked smile. Have a good summer, Harry said, and beat a hasty retreat. Chapter 22, Roman 3. Willy Wonka will not appear. Running away from home was definitely the best decision Harry had ever made. 2 weeks of exploring, reading, trying to convince himself not to buy a firebolt and, let's not forget, getting lost in the apothecary for 4 hours. He tried imagining what Hermione and Ron would say and settled on imaginary Ron saying, "Core, it's just like Hermione in a bookshop." It made him smile. He bought regular potion supplies, as well as extras of things he'd needed last year and didn't have, like sugar for magical candy recipes and extra beetles for red coloring. After agonizing over a self-stirring cauldron and then visualizing Snape's probable commentary on people who needed the help of self-stirring cauldrons to make third-year recipes, Harry gave up on deciding what to buy and picked up a catalogue for Owl Order. With last year's example in mind, Harry redid his painstakingly drafted S on shrinking potions twice before giving up on figuring out how to improve it any further. He didn't bother with occlumency practice. It wasn't as if attempting to clear his mind and fill it up with Quidditch tips had helped with Aunt Marge, and he had to assume your average dark wizard would be more trouble than his Aunt Marge. At least, he assumed so. His mind was, as a disdainful footnote in the textbook had put it, chaotic, full of fire and principle, antithetical to proper restraint. Thankfully, a conversation he struck up with Florian Fortescue put paid to any tendency to sulk, because nothing could ruin the happiness he felt when he got to come behind the counter to see how one of the less proprietary ice creams was made, in a fantastic combination of cooking, potion making, and clever application of the cooling charm. Harry practiced his cooling charm on a glass of lemonade, and the ice didn't melt all afternoon. It may not be changing the world or handling dragons, Mr. Fortescue confided in him, but seeing a sad child smile when I hand him a sundae with a dancing cherry on top makes me think I'm making the world a little bit brighter in my own way. It provided a pleasant diversion from thinking about Sirius Black and whether or not he was going to die or trying to talk himself out of brooding over not having bought a firebolt, right up until Ron started talking about honeydukes on the train, and Harry realized his new interest in wizards' candymaking was just another way his relatives were managing to make his life more difficult than it already had to be. Perhaps it was with all this in mind that upon having a horrific encounter with a Dementor and being fed chocolate, his first question for Remus Lupin when he returned from making sure the Dementors had left the train was, "Do you know the recipe for this?" Remus Lupin's humble apology that he wasn't sure, really, didn't ruin Harry's determination to figure it out. He'd always liked puzzles and candy, and puzzles made of candy seemed like a slightly more adult interest. He was a whole 13 years old, after all. It provided a good distraction from Draco's expert teasing, which Harry hadn't grown fonder of by being away from him for a whole summer. Professor Lupin looked particularly shabby next to all the other teachers in their best robes. "Look at Snape," Ron hissed in Harry's ear. Professor Snape, the potions master, was staring along the staff table at Professor Lupin. It was common knowledge that Snape wanted the defense against the dark arts job, but even Harry was startled at the expression twisting his thin, sallow face. It was beyond anger. It was loathing. Harry knew that expression only too well. It was the look Snape had worn for most of Harry's first year, and only looking at Snape now made Harry realize that he hadn't seen it since sometime near the beginning of his second year at school. These days, Professor Snape varied between angry, tired, and blank around Harry. When had that changed? It was going to bother Harry. He knew it was, even if he didn't have time for another worry. Chapter 23. Neville is going to regret this. The first potions class of term included Draco, Lizard, Malfoy earning his nickname by getting Ron and Harry to cut up his daisy roots, peel his shrivelfig, and topping it off with the whispered observation, "Watch my timing, Potter. You might learn something." Harry wished Buckbeak had shredded both his arms. Try to wrap up this year's mass murderer out to kill Yowberforth end of term, would you, Potter? Draco continued in an undertone, as Harry watched him add his caterpillars on a 4 count and tried to help Ron salvage his daisy roots. Hermione, in the background, was whispering frantically to Neville to clear his mind and pretend he was in the greenhouse revising. It seemed to be working. Neville added his caterpillars with a mix of clockwise and counterclockwise stirs and then fumbled in his potions kit purposefully. His orange, supposed to be green, potion turned an awful grey colour that at least didn't look quite salarid. "Hey, Harry," said Seamus Finnegan, leaning over to borrow Harry's brass scales. "Have you heard? Daily Prophet this morning, they reckon Sirius Black's been sighted." "Where?" said Harry and Ron quickly. On the other side of the table, Malfoy looked up, listening closely. "Not too far from here," said Seamus, who looked excited. "It was a muggle who saw him." Course, she didn't really understand. The muggles think he's just an ordinary criminal, don't they? So she phoned the telephone hotline. By the time the Ministry of Magic got there, he was gone. "Not too far from here," Ron repeated, looking significantly at Harry. He turned around and saw Malfoy watching closely. "What, Malfoy? Need something else skinned?" But Malfoy's eyes were fixed Harry. He leaned across the table. "I'm surprised you're not more enthusiastic, Potter. If it was me, I'd be out there hunting him down already." "What are you talking about, Malfoy?" said Ron roughly. "Don't you know, Potter?" breathed Malfoy, his pale eyes narrowed. "Know what?" "You don't," Malfoy said, looking like Christmas had come early. "Let me be there when someone tells you I want to see your face," he breathed. "What are you talking about?" said Harry angrily. But at that moment Snape called. "You should have finished adding your ingredients by now. This potion needs to stew before it can be drunk, so clear away while it simmers, and then we'll test Longbottom's." Neville's grey potion, which made Hermione look like she might cry, was dutifully tested on his toad Trevor. Everyone waited. Snape eyed it narrowly, seeming displeased. "Is Trevor poisoned?" Neville asked in a tiny voice. "You, boy, have managed to produce a potion with absolutely no effects. What did you do?" "I added, powdered clover leaves and shredded horseradish to counteract." Snape stared at Neville for a very long moment, the entire class holding its breath. Snape's nostrils flared. "A point to Gryffindor for having learned how to not kill anyone by accident," Snape said. He smiled thinly. "You have just made the mistake of raising my expectations, Longbottom." Neville went even paler, and Harry moved to surreptitiously keep him from falling out of his chair in a dead faint. "Class dismissed. Potter stay." Malfoy jeered something about servants, which Harry tuned out with long practice. Malfoy was far too happy today. It would have been nice if it had been a pretense for a chat, but it was mostly a pretense to make Harry deal with spatters of leech juice and putting leftover cat spleens back in their jars, which was precisely as nice as it sounded. "Am I likely to be impressed by your summer essay?" "Are you ever?" "I will take points for cheek, Potter." "I don't know," Harry said, trying not to breathe. "It's not 2 feet longer than you want, and it's not wrong, but I think I'm missing something." "No problems with your relations, then?" "We didn't get around to killing each other, if that's what you mean." "Charmingly put. Any other near-death experiences to report so far this term?" Harry paused, trying to figure out if the Dementors on the train counted, and was startled to find that his professor could make a noise like an angry tea kettle. "Has anyone checked you for curses that attract ill luck, Potter?" Snape asked abruptly. For I cannot think of another explanation. I am simply agog." Harry touched his scarred forehead and eyed his professor through his fringe. Snape seemed to let out a very long breath. "Yes, perhaps that would qualify. Very well. Professor Snape, you've already probably saved my life a bunch of times in first year. You really don't have to keep helping. Really. Please don't. Whatever dramatic history you have ascribed to me, you seem to forget that I am a teacher at this school, and so have a responsibility to protect its students." Darn it, Harry couldn't actually argue with that one. "Counterclockwise to clear, Potter," his professor snapped, and Harry, startled, switched the direct of his scrubbing. It helped. "I don't see why," Harry commented, happy to change the subject. "Because potions are a form of ritual magic, and all ritual magic has common elements. Should I look up ritual magic, then? No more than an amateur muggle cook should look up biochemistry. You would do well to learn to follow simple instructions and maintain a basic awareness of your surroundings without spending the entire class period gossiping." That was drastically unfair. Harry scrubbed vengefully and ran out of table to scrub. "Go. I have formed a clear impression of what this year is going to be like, and you will be late for lunch." Harry didn't see why it mattered if he was a little late for lunch, but huge hungry. And since when did Professor Snape know anything about muggles anyway? Chapter 24. Snape isn't good at caring about people. At breakfast on Saturday, the first weekend of term, Harry received a note. "Mr. Potter, your essay is unacceptable. Visit my office at 10 this morning to discuss it." Hermione, when Harry offered it to her, moaned. "Professor Snape's tutoring you again. He's going to tear it into little tiny pieces and soak them in acid. And laugh," Harry pointed out. "Educationally," Hermione wailed. "Are you all right, Myone?" Ron asked. "You've been a little." "Private critique," she said, and tried to drown herself in her teacup. "Don't worry," Harry hastened to say. "He's probably just going to, I don't know. Do you think it could be him deciding I'm worth tutoring?" Ron patted him on the back. "He still hates you." "Right," Harry wilted, eyeing the note balefully. Ron wasn't wrong after all, not as far as Harry knew. "You don't think he's mad about the dress, do you?" Neville asked. Harry thought Professor Snape would be mad about the dress for approximately the next decade, but it didn't seem like a good idea to say so. Professor Snape's office was a little more cheery, with the fire lit. Not very cheery, but a little. Professor Snape was sitting at his desk, 2 glasses and 2 bottles on the desk next to him. Professor Snape looked up at him and held out a roll of parchment. Harry took it and unrolled it. It was his essay, drenched in green ink, tiny corrections filling up every spare inch. Harry's eye twitched. "You will read that after we finish here, so that you may be able to tell your classmates it is what we discussed. I will have your word this goes no further than you, no matter how you matris dear little friends." "Your word, Mr. Potter, if it has any worth." Harry jerked his chin up. "I promise not to talk to anyone about this, unless it's going to get someone hurt." "Only you, Mr. Potter," Snape said tiredly. "Only you." Harry thought that sounded pretty fair, all things considered. "How much do you know about Sirius Black?" "Well, he's a murderer, a follower of Voldemort." Snape's eyes narrowed at the name. "He killed a lot of people, and now he wants to kill me, and there's something people aren't telling me." "Correct, they're not telling you, because they think you are the sort of boy who runs off to steal philosopher's stones, confront trolls, and fight basilisks. Why's everyone so worried about me fighting Sirius Black? I mean, even Draco said so, not that he was worried. He thought it was a great laugh, but Harry hesitated. My experience with you is that you will keep digging until you find out whatever adults are hiding from you for your own good, breaking every school rule you can think of and getting yourself half killed at the best of times. Fool me once, fool me twice, fool me 3 times. I am not a fool, Mr. Potter." I'm not doing it for the glory, Harry managed to mutter. I know you think so, but I'm not. It's just Hermione had to, or Voldemort would have had the stone, and Ginny'd be dead now. And in another, far more likely future, you would have died twice over, along with your friends. Well, I didn't. Spare me your adolescent fit, if you want me to explain. Harry twitched, straightened his shoulders from their unconscious hunch, and tried to look attentive and perky. Snape looked vaguely disturbed. We are going to talk about two things in order, Snape said. Why you should not attempt to confront Black, and why you should. That doesn't make any sense. At Snape's dark look, Harry shut his mouth. Snape poured careful measures of an amber liquid into one glass and a pale pearl potion into the other. Harry recognized calming draught. Snape slid it across the table to him. Drink that when you need to, Snape ordered. Professor Snape, does the headmaster know you're telling me this? I'm sure he'll figure it out, in due time. That really wasn't quite an answer, but Harry wasn't going to stop him from this uncharacteristic burst of what seemed weirdly like honesty. Harry was feeling very good about this plan, until a snake-quick motion and a barked word made the world fade around him, in a flash of red. Harry woke up on the floor and scrambled to his feet, searching for his wand. He met Snape's eyes. The man was standing and had his own wand pointed at Harry and Harry's wand held casually in his offhand. His eyes were empty. The reason you should not face an adult wizard in battle is that you will die, just as I could have killed you just then. I wasn't expecting. And Sirius Black will not strike you face to face. Harry jerked out of the way as another spell went sizzling by him and ducked behind the desk in a skidding dive. The office was large, but not endless, and he avoided 2, 3, 4 spells by sheer acrobatics, wishing for a broom. Glass shattered behind him, and Harry dodged sideways. He smelled his own hair burning and tackled his teacher into a wall. Harry went still, feeling a wand point at his throat. This is what facing an adult wizard is like, Potter. You did well at first, better than I expected, but your instincts were wrong. Instead of running away, you came at me. If I had wanted you dead, the next step would be the killing curse. Do you understand me? Dumbledore. Headmaster Dumbledore does not understand to the depth of his bones your sheer penchant for throwing yourself headlong in front of hydras. Or perhaps he finds it charming. If you attempt to confront Sirius Black alone, you will die. If you attempt to confront Sirius Black with your little friends, they will die. If you see him, run, to the headmaster preferably. Not to you, sir. Much as I would like to extinguish Sirius Black myself, between the headmaster and I, he is the better duelist. Snape's tone had never once left dead level throughout the entire conversation. It was incredibly creepy. I've fought Voldemort. You fought Quirrell and a Shade, and you are lucky to be alive. Quirrell was an average duelist at best. Sirius Black is deadly, unhinged, obsessive, cruel, and from an old dark family that teaches their children curses from the cradle. Listen, for once in your misbegotten life. Fine, Harry gritted. Once you finish explaining, this was an explanation, wasn't it? There was battle-light glittering in Professor Snape's eyes, but they settled back in their chairs as if nothing had happened, as if it had been a duel and everything was fine. Harry himself was tense as a bowstring and snatched his wand up from where Snape set it down on the table. He didn't put it away. Snape held his glass of amber liquid up to the light. It glinted gold. Fire whiskey, he commented, as if they'd just been talking about the weather, and then drank it, setting the glass back down on the desk with a click. He steepled his fingers. Do you need the calming draught, Potter? Harry shook his head. Sirius Black betrayed your parents to their deaths. They thought he was their friend, and he told Voldemort where they were hiding. Harry's breath hitched. Time went a little funny. His ears were ringing green light, a woman begging horrible laughter. Professor Snape poured himself another precise measure of fire whiskey and drank it. He eyed Harry, eyes glittering. Drink, Potter. Harry drank the calming draught and sagged back in his chair. He was their friend. Since they were in school together, Snape confirmed distantly. Dumbledore said you knew them. He was there. Well, Harry said, feeling eerily calm. I do want to find him and kill him now. You must not, Snape said. You are not walking out that door without your word you will do nothing foolish. Harry really didn't think Snape had anything he could bribe Harry with, not one thing, that would stop him from wanting to find Sirius Black and do something about him taking Harry's parents away. Well, there was one thing. You could bribe me, Harry offered, thinking aloud. Snape's expression was priceless. Harry made a mental note to revisit it when he was capable of having emotions. I want to be let back into the potions classroom after classes, and to learn to make polyjuice properly. Are you admitting to making polyjuice with my potions stores, Potter? No, I would never admit to that, Harry said, smiling at his professor. Snape didn't smile back, silly of him. There was a long silence. Harry rather thought Professor Snape should have filled it with drinking, but he wasn't in charge of Professor Snape's choices. When your friends are busy, you may study in the potions classroom as long as I am there. Do not expect me to coddle you. Go nowhere alone. Promise me you will not seek out Sirius Black. I promise. He ended up reading his shrinking solution notes, while he waited for the potion to wear off enough for him to feel comfortable walking in a straight line. Harry was really not sure convincing Professor Snape to be his tutor had been the best plan, but at least Professor Snape wasn't throwing hexes at him anymore, which had to count for something. After a start to the day like that, the rest of his weekend was incredibly anticlimactic.